All right. Thanks for coming back and thanks for joining us. We're back from a break with our very next speaker, Juan Spinel. And he's going to be talking all about GDPR, good intentions, bad implementation, ugly loopholes. Take it away, Juan.
Hello, I'm Juan, and I will be talking to you today about GDPR. So, I worked for close to 3 years in IT for luxury hospitality. During that time, we had the GDPR go live, had to implement the compliance strategy from corporate, develop internal procedures to maintain compliance across all departments. In my case, key stakeholders were HR for employee data and marketing for the clients. Other industries, other business cases, operations may have higher stakes. Some definitions, PMS, Property Management System. This is the ERP for hospitality designed from the ground up to help hotels. PII, Personally Identifiable Information, anything that can be linked back to a specific person, for example, through their name, phone number, email. Data, a fact, information, usually aggregated data which provides together some added value. Today we'll be talking about GDPR, so what GDPR aims to combat, where the implementations fell short on the technical side as well as legislative side, two loopholes, one which limits, well, the extent to which GDPR can be enforced, and a second loophole which I have seen vendors abuse to sell their product without ensuring compliance. I'll be finishing with, well, some ways to handle compliance from three perspectives and a couple horror stories thrown in. It is Halloween. So GDPR, for those who might not know, it is a set of regulations that specify companies' responsibilities with regards to customer data. It is a text of law written by lawyers, and as you can imagine, I am not a lawyer. This made interpreting the requirements within our business case a nightmare all those years ago. The scope of GDPR is, of course, the residents of the European Union, visitors to the European Union, and any company that wishes to have business with these people needs to ensure their compliance. So, following 2 decades, one could argue three, of increasingly large websites announcing data breaches, where the companies just shrug it off to, well, cost of doing business. You have also the data misuse and abuse scandals, which once again, companies shrug off to the cost of doing business. GDPR provides a framework to hold companies accountable for how they secure the data, how they use it, and what data they are holding. Noteworthy data misuse case would be 2014 Uber incident, where a journalist was followed through their interface up until her interview with one of the Uber executives. Of course, this was completely against company policy. Equally important and still making headlines today, 2016 with Cambridge Analytica. Additionally, GDPR provides residents of the European Union or people visiting the European Union with the right of forcing companies to remove public-facing data which misrepresents them. The poster child for this is, of course, Mario Costeja versus Google. For anyone who doesn't know the story, some years ago, Mario Costeja had some financial troubles. He overcame those troubles, but his life didn't quite turn around. He did some research and found the first results when Googling himself was these financial troubles of the past. Mario went to Google. Google, multi-million-dollar company. Mario, one guy in Spain. Google didn't do anything. Mario once again went to Google. Google once again didn't do anything. Mario had to take this up with courts in Spain and Europe, which led to this being one of the key cases in the right to be forgotten, leaving Mario as the poster child when all he wanted was to be forgotten. So GDPR provides the residents of the European Union, people visiting the European Union, with several rights. It is aimed primarily at the tech industry. I am providing this with a services industry perspective. Not all rights are pertinent. You wouldn't go to a hotel requesting your data to give it to another hotel. These four, which I'm going to explain, will provide a good baseline for any services industry business. You have the right to request your data to be deleted from active use by the company, your right to be forgotten. You can request for your data to be amended. In this case, typically it'll be a change in the means to reach you, your preferences, the right of correction. You remain the owner of any data generated through your interactions with the business. For example, you go to a hotel when travel is safe again. In the evening, you go to the restaurant. Of course, you don't pay, it gets billed to your room. And then you go to the bar and get a couple of beers. Again, you don't pay, they get billed to your room. These transactions are generating data points, which are linked to your reservation, which are back again linked to you. Technically, you are the owner of this information. You have, finally, the right to restrict how your data is processed within the business, how it is used with other partners. For marketing purposes, your explicit consent is required. So after the good intentions, let's see where the tech industry failed. This should remind everyone of the internet circa June 2018. Now, these cookie banners in particular come from tech giants, Twitter and LinkedIn, companies with compliance teams. These banners, however, fail at the compliance, given that users are unable to revoke acceptance of cookie-based tracking. You might think, oh yes, but Juan, these are from June 2018. Sadly, these two in particular were spotted in earlier October 2020. This banner, technically compliant, execution fails. After accessing the settings page and disabling cookies, returning to the home page also reloaded the banner, leaving the user in an endless loop. Slightly more 2019, this banner lacks accessibility for less tech-savvy users or people with sight impediments due to the high contrast buttons. People, after all, want to get to the text behind the banners. I have seen websites where this type of banner, the deselect all button did not remove all of the tracking cookies. These had to be removed manually. If you are showing this to friends, family, or colleagues, it's important to explain the risks to their privacy on not verifying that all cookies are disabled. Finally, to finish on a good note, this has been my favorite solution to date. This solution provides an easy-to-use interface. I was able to verify through the advanced settings that all tracking cookies were indeed disabled. And additionally, this implementation uses a persistent cookie such that the next visit of the website does not require going through the process again, be that next week, 3 months, 6 months. Sadly, however, these banners led to the normalization of clicking random links, which is of course an InfoSec nightmare. Now, on the legislative side, as mentioned before, GDPR is a text of law. Compared to technical standards, it fails to provide baselines. PCI compliance, for example, so PCI DSS, provides technical requirements in non-technical terms, which means anyone in the business can quickly make a checklist without needing half the IT department. For example, installing, configuring, and maintaining a firewall, not using default credentials, encrypting data as it moves between systems, developing and maintaining secure applications, arguably not applicable for the services industry, but good to keep in mind, but critically, regular security audits. Now, of course, a services business will not meet all these requirements. After all, they are not developing these kind of applications. However, they would only be able to process credit card information if it's coming from certified vendors. Now, GDPR lacks the technical baselines. It is a text of law where many articles are open to interpretation. This leaves businesses in unsteady waters with regards to their compliance, especially in regards to how they are sharing data with other partners or even within the business. Some elements do provide specifics. However, this is usually in the recital, which technically are not part of the law. Again, not helping. Additionally, as opposed to stating some baseline security investments or requirements, whether they be in-house or outsourced, GDPR texts refer to state-of-the-art when referring to security infrastructure. Now, that means a company can only demonstrate compliance by getting more and more blinky boxes every year without actually configuring or monitoring them, because, of course, the new blinky boxes are the state-of-the-art. Hopefully, future iterations of the regulations, new regulations across the world, will address these shortcomings, leading to increased privacy for, well, constituents of the EU and citizens of the world. So, small horror story. This is me circa April 2018. I'm stressing out because I need to figure out if I'm compliant. And of course, lots of companies are calling up to say, hey, we can offer you GDPR compliance. 3 companies actually seem to provide something interesting, so they came in to discuss their product. It turns out what they were offering was customer relationship management tool, meaning I would be having my data sent off to a different company. Not sure how they were going to be doing that. Essentially, one more point of failure. I have since found out 2 of these 3 companies have gone bankrupt following GDPR fines. So if people say they're selling compliance, look away, folks. Now, as storage and computing power get cheaper, it becomes increasingly easy to store for longer periods of time and process data for business purposes. With little oversight, this generates PII in uncontrolled amounts, often on less secure infrastructure. And it is key to remember that you need only lose control data from one person to lose your compliance. Now, the first loophole that people seem to be unaware of when trying to enforce this law as citizens, it's that national laws can and do supersede data protection regulations. For example, in the case of HR, after an employee leaves a company, they can request to have their employee data deleted. HR is held to comply, but payroll, contracts, and often evaluation forms need to be kept for set periods of time. So how did HR actually comply? Well, HR had to remove any sensitive data, such as biometrics, from their management platform, usually covered by national employee protection laws. They had to remove the employee profile as a potential future candidate and verify that any recruitment platforms they use are no longer linked to this employee through them. Now, if we go back to the example where you travel is safe again, go to the hotel, you had your meal, had your beers, now you're leaving. You have to pay. When you pay, you're generating a transaction record, which is linked to your reservation, which in turn is linked back to you through name, phone number, email address. Same when you go to a restaurant, especially with modern booking platforms. These transaction records can't be modified because money laundering. The risk is, of course, that as we move towards paperless solutions, both companies will provide analytics on both these financial records or the HR records. Now, arguably, HR could attempt anonymization, but this will only work if you're able to anonymize the entire company. How many people have worked in companies where IT was composed of 2, 3, maybe 5 people out of 100? very difficult to not notice the outliers. In the case of the financial records, once again, losing the data from your clients off-premise without their consent is losing compliance, even if it's not done for marketing purposes. Bonus for the UK, following the first lockdown, bars and pubs opened. Visitors had to check into the locations for contact tracing. The NHS enforced an application which allowed people to check into these locations scanning QR codes, making it easy. Since then, it's been noticed that data from this government-backed program was being harvested and sold on to advertisers. The last news I have is that the ICO is planning on suing the government because of this. Second loophole is in regards with how your third-party vendors provide analytics. So you have your business with your ERP and your nice database. Now the problem is your ERP provides Windows 2.0 graphics, sorry. So you need a separate business to give you some usable analytics. Except of course, this business doesn't provide an on-premise solution. Now I looked for the largest providers of analytics, Salesforce. Salesforce don't offer on-premise solutions. They do have solutions that connect directly to your ERP, which would be compliant as you are never storing data on their servers. However, maybe your business can't quite afford Salesforce, so you get a smaller provider. The smaller provider can't quite afford to pay Oracle, SAP, or other tech giants for their APIs, which means they need to rebuild your database off-premise. I have seen vendors who try to do this through unencrypted email, which big no-no, and critically, with no controls as to which data is being shared over to them. The issue here is, of course, that, well, you as a business are seen as the data controller, whereas your vendor is only the data processor. This means you have different levels of responsibility. Well, while your vendor's application may be GDPR compliant, they can delete information from their databases and all that. The way they get the information is not necessarily compliant, nor are the controls they can try to implement. If the vendor is breached and they have information about people which they should not have, as data controller, your business is fined a heavier penalty. In the reverse, if the business is breached and these lack of controls are found, the vendor can claim to be compliant, given that data flow controls are not in their hands. Horror story number 2. So, like most people, I get my fair share of phishing and spam emails. Recently, I've noticed more and more people are spoofing domains from companies that I may have had contact with in the past, usually abusing some subdomain or otherwise. Being the nice, jolly fellow I am, I let the company know that something's going on. 99% of the time, I don't hear back, except when the guy reading the email is from sales. This happened once, only once, and I'm very glad it only happened once. This guy from sales told me to fuck off, their domain is secure, nothing's going on. I defanged the links, showed him his email was, well, showed him the mail was pointing somewhere else, told him, just please check in with IT. He said, no, the mail was from me. And 2 weeks later, they, of course, were in the news for compromised infrastructure. Please let your sales guys know disclosure is always good and should be forwarded to you. Now, with all this in mind, how can we as IT people best help enforce compliance? Well, if you work in IT in the services industry, triple check how your data flow out of your infrastructure is controlled. What controls do you have in place? Are they human? Are they automatic? Check the contracts with your vendors. How do they assume responsibility if they get breached? How can they demonstrate data has been deleted from their infrastructure? And critically, what is their incident response plan if they get breached? And how does your business fit into that incident response plan? You need that information for developing your own incident response plan. As clients of the services industry, it's important to be clear when making reservations that your data is only to be used for information regarding the reservations and billing. In order to add preventive measures, use a catch-all email or even plus aliasing from Gmail. This way, if there is an issue, you can quickly alert the business. Should you get a satisfaction survey or marketing of any sort, ask to contact the IT department. They will be able to correct any issues and provide evidence of account deletion, even from third-party vendors. Potentially, they can even get you a discount for future visits for helping them correct the compliance issue. Finally, should you be involved in a risk assessment, red team exercise, or just a penetration test, offer your IT point of contact to review the data flow out of their ERP. The red flags will pop up, as well as verifying procedures for records not affected by GDPR, US, Asia, Africa, Oceania. Are the controls automatic or human? What protections are there in place in the case of mistakes? By helping companies implement better controls, we are also providing the population with better privacy. Companies may forget that compliance is not something that is obtained once and kept forever, but rather something which needs to be verified every day and can be lost once forever. Now, finally, one success story. That's me again, circa this time last year, going to Japan for the Rugby World Cup, where I had, of course, had to go through their system to buy tickets. They have now started advertising for the 2023 World Cup in France. So I received the marketing, and I tried to check if my account still worked. I noticed it didn't. Contacted their DPO, who kind of said, yeah, GDPR, we don't need the data beyond the fact that the tickets were sold. The World Cup was over. We are now rebuilding everything. Just kept the email for the CRM. Good case of, well, limited time data retention. Goes to show even world businesses can do it. I hope everyone was able to get some insight into the workings of GDPR and how best to use this legislation for the protection of your own privacy. Bit early for the beer for me, but I know some viewers are further ahead in the time zones. Now, if you're not sure if your company is compliant, do not go looking for a company that sells compliance. First thing to do, close the tap, stop any data leaks on your side. Second step, get a lawyer, and get a lawyer in the room, not in the emails. You want someone to be there who can properly get an expert on site, provide privileged communication, and really help you with the disclosure if you do need to disclose to your local GDPR enforcers. I would like to thank the beer farmers for organizing this. I would like to thank the mentors for providing so much time for helping with the public speaking. And I know that the beer farmers are British based, so you might be wondering, well, why should people in the UK care? Well, as people in the UK, it's very likely you will be visiting Europe, maybe in a couple of years. In this case, GDPR, of course, applies to you. If you are, however, a business in the UK, well, you have the Data Protection Act, which is enforced by the ICO. The ICO also enforces GDPR in the UK, which means a business can be penalized twice for the same mishap. Thank you. I hope that was interesting.
Great, thanks, Juan. Fantastic talk, all about GDPR. So I think we've got 5 minutes left. So I'd like to open up with a question. Especially in the UK, you can't mention GDPR without mentioning British Airways. What are your thoughts on the recent fine? Because I know
So
initially the
British,
ICO intended to fine him. Yep,
so
go ahead.
British Airways is a special case because they are providing a service, of course, with the air flights. However, they do have a lot of the technical elements behind them. I think it's a special case. GDPR, if we take it, if we make an analogy with a bank, if a bank gets robbed, they don't get fined for getting robbed. So BA has been under a lot of heat the past couple of years. It was a key case study when I was still doing my degree in IT because of the data outage in 2017. Is it fair? Is it not fair? I mean, they've had enough time to rebuild and reshape, and definitely agree that the ICO is right in fining them. I am surprised that the fine keeps getting lower and lower, though.
Yeah, I mean, we've got 2 questions, so I'm just going to make this very quick. My concern, and I'd love to get your thoughts, is having these fines reduced, what's the incentive for the companies to then start doing the right thing? It could be more cost effective, in fact, to not do the right thing and simply pay the fine.
So that's the thing, right? Because you don't have a baseline requirement, so you need to invest, say, 5% of your profits in security. You don't have any incentives on that sense. It's very difficult, and the only real loss is, of course, the fine, and then the trust the public has in you. I think hopefully with the new regulations that are coming up, you have the California Privacy Act. I'm hoping we're going to be getting some more in the Americas and Asia popping up soon, which will then lead to more of this, especially with multinationals like BA, who are not just dealing with British customers, but really worldwide.
Yeah, I totally agree. So fingers crossed. And certainly hope that's going to be the case. So we have 2 questions from the audience. I don't have them to hand. Scott, could you ask them, please?
Yeah, sure. So the first one's from Hale Nolly, who asks, what are the biggest challenges you face balancing security with compliance? And he added in the caveat of obviously compliance does not always equal security.
So if you have security, you should have compliance, because if you secure your information, nothing's leaving. You have 1 point of failure, not 2. The biggest challenge I faced with compliance would have been with regards to vendors. As I mentioned, I worked in hospitality, so we had information coming in from other places. It's very difficult to be able to explain to people that we can delete information about them or anonymize it, but if they're reserved through booking.com, for example, we have no control over that information there. And I would say that that was the biggest challenge.
Okay, thanks for that. We also have a question from B, who's asked, can we say human controls in some cases have always failed?
Human control, I mean, it's obviously a big point of failure. We always say the weakest link is, of course, the end user. However, if you're, for example, scanning passports because you need to provide a list to the police on a daily basis, are you automating this to then scan where this is coming from? And then you're adding another point of failure. Where is that information being routed through? I think being able to know the human element there, I would say, is really not just the people doing the operations, but really understanding where your information is going and how it's being routed for the people who are working with it.
Okay. Listen, I just want to relay a couple of comments from the general Slack and personally. This is kind of like the coolest talk I've been to about GDPR. GDPR sounds really super boring, and you always see it crop up, and you're like, nah, I'll just leave it. This has been really super informative. Yeah, thanks for also backing us in the whole, the cookie pop-ups. Just it does my head in, and it's not clear, and it's kind of like a knee-jerk reaction. It's not quite what it was intended for. I think a lot of webmasters, if we want to call them that, have got a lot to answer for. But no, thanks. That was an awesome talk. That was super, super cool. I think we're going to go back to Mike now we're going to go back to a commercial break. But honestly, Juan, hang out with us, stay here. If anybody wants to grab Juan on Twitter, do it. He's also on Slack. Come chat, come ask questions, come and hang out with us. Over to you, Mike.
Yeah, I just want to say once again, Juan, thank you very much. As Scott pointed out, GDPR and compliance generally can be a bit dry. It's one of the big things I have to do where I work. But you really brought it to life there and delivered some really, really valuable information. So very well done. I think that's time now. So again, on behalf of the beer farmers and the crew and the people watching, thanks a lot, Juan. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.